Plot the functions f of x equals x squared and g of x equals x to the fifth on the same grid. Insert the symbol greater than, less than, or equal to make the relation true. Let's start by sketching a graph of f of x is equal to x squared. First of all, go to y equals on your calculator and enter x raised to the second power. Next, we'll create a good viewing window. Let's go to Zoom and select Zoom Decimal, which is number 4. In order to find some points on the graph, we can use the trace feature. We see that when x is equal to 0, y is equal to 0. So we want to plot the point 0, 0 on our graph. When x is negative 1, we see that y is equal to 1. The square of negative 1 is negative 1 times negative 1, which is equal to positive 1. So we need to plot the point negative 1, 1 on our graph. When x is equal to positive 1, y is equal to 1 because 1 times 1 is equal to 1. So we need to plot the point 1, 1 on our graph. We can now connect these points with the shape that's given, which is a parabola. Next, let's sketch the graph of g of x equals x to the fifth on the same grid. We'll go back to y equals, and for y2, enter x raised to the fifth. Go to Graph. At this time, instead of seeing a parabola, we see an S-shaped curve. To get some points on the graph, we can use Trace. When x is equal to 0, y is equal to 0, because 0 to the fifth is 0. So we need to plot the point 0, 0. When x is equal to negative 1, y2 is equal to negative 1. So we see that the point negative 1, negative 1 is on the graph of g. When x is equal to 1, y2 is equal to 1. So the point 1, 1 is on the graph of g. 1 to the fifth is equal to 1. So we go ahead and connect these 3 points using the S-shaped curve that we see on the calculator screen. Now that we have the 2 graphs, we'll go ahead and use them along with a table of values to answer parts A through E. First of all, we have for x equals 0, f of x is either greater than, less than, or equal to g of x. So let's go to Table Set, second window, and change the independent variable to ask. Then go to the table. We're given that x is equal to 0, so we enter 0 for x. And we see that both y1 and y2 are equal to 0. When we look at the graph at x is equal to 0, we see that the 2 graphs share a point in common. They both share the point 0, 0. Therefore, f of x is equal to g of x when x is equal to 0. For part B, we have for x between 0 and 1, f of x is either greater than, less than, or equal to g of x. Well, let's go ahead and pick a value of x that's between 0 and 1. Let's say a half. So we enter 1/2 for x. And we compare the values of y1 and y2. Remember that y1 corresponds with f and y2 corresponds with g. Well, 0.25 is bigger than 0.03125, so that tells us that f of x is bigger than g of x. When we look between 0 and 1 along the x-axis, we notice that the graph of f, which is in red, is above the graph of g, which is in blue. In part C, we have for x equals 1, f of x is either greater than, less than, or equal to g of x. So we go ahead and enter 1 for x. We compare the two y values and we see that they're both equal to 1. When we look at the graph, we see that both the graphs of f and g share the common point of 1, 1. So f of x is equal to g of x when x is equal to 1. In part D, we have for x greater than 1, f of x is either greater than, less than, or equal to g of x. So let's pick a number that's bigger than 1. Let's say 2. We compare the two values and we see that the first y value, 4, is less than 32. So that tells us that f of x is less than g of x. And on the graph, if we look to the right of x equals 1, we see that the graph of f in red is below the graph of g, which is in blue. So f of x is less than g of x when x is greater than 1. Finally, in part E, we have for x is less than 0, f of x is either greater than, less than, or equal to g of x. So let's try a negative value like negative 1. When x is negative 1, we see that y1 is bigger than y2 because positive numbers are bigger than negative numbers. When we look at x equals negative 1 along the x-axis, we see that the graph of f in red is above the graph of g in blue. Therefore, f of x is greater than g of x when x is less than 0.